Native Captain in Civil War. Grayson's hands tore at a dead prisoner's uniform, the fabric stiff with sweat and blood, as his own threadbare rags hung like a beggar's shame. His men shivering, starving, feral in the cold, raw survival stories await. Subscribe to Native Legends and History Stories now. What pushed this reluctant soldier to shed his innocence for a killer's skin? The fuse lit fast. Grayson's father crumpled dead by late 1860, lungs failing as the North and South sharpened their blades. War exploded, muskets roared at Bull Run. By 1861, millions stampeded to enlist. 2 million across the states, boots pounding dirt, leaving farms empty. Indian Territory buzzed to, men vanishing into camps, their wives' handkerchiefs fluttering like ghosts. Grayson felt at the pull. The itch newspapers screamed victories, defeats, bodies piling up. His fingers flexed, imagining a rifle's weight. But his mother's gaunt face anchored him. She kneaded dough with shaking hands, flour dusting 3 hollow-eyed siblings. No father, no money, just him, too young to carry it all, too old to dodge the stares. The town turned, vicious whispers struck like hail. Neighbors leaned on fences, spitting venom. Walsh, Grayson educated, able-bodied, hiding while others bleed. Voices overlapped, relentless. He's soft, a farmer barked, tobacco staining his teeth. Could be an officer, coward instead. A woman sneered, her washboard slapping water. Recruiters hammered the door at dawn. Bang, bang, bang. Your PAS dead, sure. But the South's dying too. Inside, his mother's grip bruised his arm. You're all we've got left, she rasped, voice splintering. He slammed the door, heart slamming harder outside. The muttering swelled. By 1862, 3/4 of the region's men were gone, 750,000 Confederates alone. Historians tally, leaving Grayson a glaring outlier. His every step judged, it crashed over him. Sweat-soaked, he hauled grain from the field sack, slipping when women by the creek pounced. Scared of gunfire, Walsh, one taunted her laugh, a blade letting boys die for you. Another jabbed soapsuds dripping red in the sun. His chest heaved, he could stay. Chop would feed mouth, swallow the bile, or go prove he wasn't gutless. Numbers don't lie. 50,000 dead by mid-1862, and the war barely blinked. Duty to family, sense, duty to pride. Madness both clawed at him. Night sealed it, boots stomped close, crunch. Crunch, a drunken slur sliced the dark. Grayson's yellow. A rock smashed the cabin wall, glass shivering. His sister whimpered, a small sob swallowed by shadows. His mother twisted, a rag, eyes hard. They'll never stop, her words landed like a slap. He lurched up, grabbed his father's coat, frayed heavy with ghosts, and stormed out. Dawn found him at the recruiter's tent, tobacco smoke curling thick. I'll show him, he growled, scrawling his name as if carving it in stone. Honey Springs loomed, blood, chaos, a chance to choke the doubter, silent even if it tore him apart. Grayson's boots squelched in the creek bottom mud. At Honey Springs, the air thick with gun smoke and the sour tang of fear. July 17, 1863, the sun blazed. Mosquitoes swarmed, and his Indian Brigade unit hunched low, rifles slick with sweat. He was a captain now. Too young, voice still rough. The youngest in the pack, his chest heaved. Pride warring with dread across the field. Union forces loomed, 3,000 men. Cannons gleaming, outnumbering the Confederates, 6,000. Nearly 2-to-1 shots split the air. Smoke clawed his throat 50 yards off. To Creek scouts sprawled dead, their fresh Union blue coats already gone. Yanked off by their own side before the blood cooled. Grayson's men moved fast, scavengers in the chaos. He'd stumbled into command, green untested. Thrust up because the brigade bled leaders like a stuck pig. A mere boy, he'd scoff later, but the weight hit hard. Captains usually bore scars and years, not the smooth jaw of youth. His hands trembled, barking orders while grizzled soldiers shot him. Sit-along glances, trustin' as the mud underfoot. The Union line surged, boots pounding, bayonets flashing, and Grayson's world shrank to the shriek of bullets and the wet thud of flesh hitting earth. It unraveled quick. General Douglas Cooper hunched behind a ridge, maps flapping, yelled retreat before half the men even fired. Grayson's breath caught smoke, parting to reveal the mess. Hundreds crouched, rifles cold, never loosed, bad management. He'd spit later, and the sting held truth. Cooper's force, scattered, half-starved, faced a Union machine, oiled by Fort Gibson's steady supplies. Historians peg it on numbers and logistics. 3,000 tight-knit Federals, crushing a frayed 6,000. Grayson saw cowardice plain and raw. "Hold the line," he rasped, voice cracking, but Cooper's order drowned him. Men stumbled back, boots slipping. The day lost in a haze of dust and curses. Then Colonel Chili McIntosh surged up, face carved hard, eyes aflame, his voice slashing through the smoke. "In Muskogee the sun rises eternal, but men must die. Choose how. As warriors are cowards." Grayson's pulse hammered the words, sinking deep. The sun glared timeless, mocking their frail gasps. Men gripped knives, rifles. Some snarled a guttural cry, ripping free for a heartbeat. It burned death as honor. A shield for home, scholars might call it bravado. Masking panic, Grayson felt it, sear raw as the blood pooling around him. The fire snuffed fast, retreat hit a scrambling, swearing root. Honey Springs fell. Grayson's unit slogged off, mud sucking at their heels, leaving carnage behind. Farms and cabins lay bare, over 100 torched in the Union's wake. Records tally families peeked from doorways, faces ashen, hands clutching quilts. "Flee south or stay," a woman whispered, voice trembling as wagons groaned under hasty loads. Kids' pots, a single hen flapping loose. Others stayed, praying Federal mercy wasn't a myth. Grayson's company slunk behind the lines, shadows in the dusk. A Creek soldier knelt by a Union corpse, yanking off boots still warm with life. "Better than Confederate trash," he muttered, leather creaking as he tugged. They had a rhythm, boots first, then coats, then pants, if the stains weren't too bad, draping the dead in their own gray rags. A grim swap of fates. Mud from Honey Springs still caked Grayson's boots as war dragged on relentless, grinding his company into shadows of men. Late 1863 or down, winter's bite sharpened frost, crusting the Indian Territory's red earth. The Confederacy's supply lines frayed to threads. Only 30% of Mississippi troops had decent uniforms, historians later reckon, leaving Grayson's ragged band shivering, RIBS poking through threadbare shirts, breath fogged in the chill, lips cracked and bleeding as they crouched around a dying fire, embers spitting weak sparks. A Union prisoner lurched into camp one dusk, blue coat thick, boots scuffed but sturdy, hands bound, eyes darting. Grayson's fingers raw and trembling, tore into the wool, peeling it free. The fabric stiff with sweat and grime. His own rags tattered, smelling of rot, slipped off his shoulders like a shed skin. "Take these," he muttered, shoving them onto the prisoner, who flinched as the cold bit deeper. His men swarmed. Boots yanked, pants ripped, coats claimed, leaving the captive shivering in their gray castoffs, a living ghost swap for warmth. Night stretched thin. Grayson led a patrol, boots crunching frozen grass, his blonde private stalking close, hair wild, eyes glinting like a hawk's. They crept through a pine grove, moon a sliver overhead, air sharp with resin. Ahead, 2 Union scouts sprawled dead asleep, rifles propped on a stump, snores bubbling soft in the dark. Firelight flickered over their slack jaws, coats bunched under heads like pillows. The private's knife winked, voice a hiss, "We cut them now." Quick and done. Grayson's chest tightened. Those faces smooth, unguarded, could have been kin. He gripped the man's wrist, breath sharp, let him dream. "We move." The private's glare burned, but they slunk back, pine needles pricking their souls, dodging the open roads. Mercy flickered, maybe a scrap of grace in a war that swallowed 300,000 souls by then. Or just weariness. The weight clung heavier than the frost on his lashes. Raids kept them alive. Word hissed through camp, a Union haymaking crew camped north of the Verdigris River, sides gleaming, guarded by Fort Gibson's detachment. Grayson's blood thrummed a pulse in his ears. He rallied his crew, 10 gaunt figures, faces etched with hunger. His cousin, Valentine McCanley, among them, leaner, a month older, teeth flashing in a grin like it was a lark. The plans snapped tight, crossed the lines, hit at dusk, fade fast. They struck, boots pounded prairie sod grass, slashing their shins, sky bruising. Purple rifles cracked. Grayson's men unleashed chaos. Yells tore from their guts, jagged and wild, shredding the air. The Union crew reeled, hay bales toppled, eyes bulged as shouts of Choctaw erupted, raw panic splitting their ranks. They weren't just desperate rebels, wielding terror's mask. Horses bolted, carts smoked, flames licking dry stalks as half the enemy scattered, boots kicking dust. Victory loomed sharp as a blade's edge. Then Gunther swaggered up, boots glossy, voice barking over the snap of burning grass. "Get me, men, we charge again." Grayson stepped in jaw clenched, dirt streaking his face. Burgess nodded, to grim coat flapping like a torn flag. The rest froze, eyes dull, hands slack, boots rooted in ash. Gunder's chest deflated, a bullet had grazed him. Brass buckle shrieking, leather puckered, leaving a red welt swelling on his belly. He buckled, wheezing, face gray. I'm hit. Can't lead. Grayson's gaze hardened. No blood, just a dent. A jolt to his spine. Gunter waved. Retreat shrill, abandoning Commander Howland. In the haze men bolted. Curses flying, rifles dragging, leaving scorched earth in a sour stink. Grayson's fists knotted, nails biting palms as Gunter's flimsy shell cracked. Pride bruised deeper than flesh, while the war's toll churned on, unstoppable. Dust from the haymaker's rage still gritted Grayson's palms as the war turned into late 1864, pulling his company into a new gamble. General Richard M. Gano swept into camp, his boots gleaming, voice clipped with purpose. News of a Union wagon train from Fort Scott, Kansas, loaded with supplies for Fort Gibson, had reached him, and he aimed to snatch it. Grayson's spine stiffened, his resolve now a sharpened blade. He'd vowed to join every raid, to carve his mark in this relentless fight. The Second Battle of Cabin Creek loomed, September 27, 1864, over 100 wagons stretching the horizon, guarded by 300 Union troops ripe for Gano's 2,000 rebels to overwhelm. Grayson rallied his men, a tight knot of 10, their faces gaunt but eyes fierce, and they marched under Gano's command, boots pounding the red dirt, rifles slung low with intent. Darkness veiled their advance as they slipped toward the creek, pine branches brushing their shoulders, the air thick with damp earth and tension. Grayson led his squad near the front, positioning them along the creek bank, where mud clung to their knees, and the faint creak of wagon wheels drifted through the night. Gano's plan was clear: strike at dawn, catch the Union sprawled and groggy. Grayson's throat ached, raw from hours of rallying his men in Muskogee, his voice fraying to a hoarse whisper as he urged them into formation, hands steadying rifles in the gloom. The Union camp stirred, a lantern swayed. Shadows staggered and a drunk reeled out, boots sloshing, curses tumbling from his whiskey-soaked tongue. "You rebels burn," he bellowed, lurching toward Grayson's line, spittle glinting in the faint light. "Halt!" a soldier's snapped voice cutting the dark once, twice, then a third time. The man stumbled closer, heedless, until a rifle cracked, the shot punching through his chest. He crumpled, blood steaming in the chill silence. Swallowing his last slur, dawn bled across the sky, and Grayson gave the signal, his arm slashing down, a ragged yell ripping from his throat as his men surged forward alongside Gano's force. Hooves thundered, rifles blazed, and the Union line buckled under the sudden onslaught, wagons tipping, crates splintering, horses shrieking as Grayson drove his squad straight into the chaos. He aimed for the stockades, wooden spikes jutting along the creek, and hacked at them with an axe. Splinters flying, his men firing over his shoulder. To cover the breach, a creek elder pressed a pouch of war medicine into his palm, eyes urgent, but Grayson thrust it back. Sweat streaking his face, determined to face the storm unshielded. "Keep moving," he rasped, voice nearly gone, pushing his men through the gap as bullets whizzed past, one grazing his sleeve. Pleasant Porter charged beside him, the only other Creek in the fray, his breath heaving as they toppled the barricade together, wood cracking under their boots. By noon the wagons smoked, over $1.5 million in Union goods torched or seized, 300 Federals dead to the Confederates 50, a brutal tally etched in the dirt. Night fell heavy round a spitting fire, and Jackson Moon stood pipe clenched, smoke curling as he eyed Grayson. Old Captain ran from fights. "This one don't," he grunted, striking a match with a flick. Men murmured, nods rippling through the haze, their hands still trembling from the day's fury. Grayson sat silent, knuckles bruised. His courage laid bare, no charms, no crutches, just the raw will that had carried him through the breach. Historians might call it bravado, a young man chasing proof. In the firelight it weighed real, forged in blood and smoke, a defiance louder than his lost voice. Embers from the Cabin Creek raid still flickered in Grayson's mind as the war's clamor faded, leaving him crouched by a fire in early 1865, the air sharp with pine and memory. His hands rough and scarred traced the rim of a dented canteen, the weight of years settling deep. He'd stormed stockades, dodged bullets, led men through blood-soaked muck, yet a splinter of doubt pierced him. Cold and persistent, was it courage or just a boy's reckless sprint? Back then barely beyond youth, he'd faced death without blinking. Over 600,000 gone by the war's close, historians tallied, and he danced with the tally like it was a dare. His breath had quickened not from dread, but a wild rush, the risks a haze he hadn't weighed. He stared into the flames, jaw clenched, wondering if the bravery men saw was merely a kid. To green to fear years clarified his gaze. Grayson rose, boots grinding the dirt, the fire's warmth brushing his legs, as his thoughts deepened true courage. He judged now, didn't leap blind. It stared down danger, saw death's teeth glint, and advanced anyway. Steady and deliberate because duty called. He'd watched Gunter buckle over a scratch, seen men freeze, but he'd pressed on, voice shredding, hands stained. Not for cheers, but for those beside him. Historians might peg it as survival's reflex, not valor. Grayson knew it sharper. A choice carved when youth's fog lifted, revealing the raw edge of what he'd braved. "Guess I learned late," he murmured, voice rough, nudging a stone into the coals, its crack lost in the hiss. The fire waned and Grayson stood firm, shaped by war's hard lessons, his truth forged in the crucible. Bravery meant facing the inevitable, unflinching, a quiet strength etched deep. That's what lingered, not tales or trophies, but a mark burned into his core. Loved Grayson's tale. Subscribe to Native Legends and History Stories on YouTube. Dig into more raw lives from a brutal age.